So I was doing it and I felt like a snake energy come into my body and go up my spine. And it was very like black and white. Like before I felt one way, and then after this, I felt another way, and I was all of a sudden part of LGBTQ. And yeah, I just fell further into this like hamster wheel of just seeking healing that just never actually came.
Wow.
I ended up ordering a Bible, and I read the New Testament. And so that was just where everything changed for me.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to take a moment to introduce myself to anyone who is new. I am Rebecca, and I spent most of my life as an atheist and then got deep into New Age spirituality for about 2 years. And then Jesus saved me in a profound dream. If you want to hear my entire testimony, please watch episode number 29 of the podcast. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do that is through email. You can email me at Rebecca, LEM123 at gmail.com. And also, if you want to set up one-on-one call with me just to get to know me or share your story with me, you can use the link in my link tree to set that up. It's completely free. And if you'd like to share your testimony, please send me a message. I would love to share your testimony here on the podcast. And if you want to support the ministry, there are two ways to do so. You can either make a donation or you can shop at the FFT store, where we sell items such as the one I'm wearing now, which says Salty Matthew 5:13, but there's lots of other options in there. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to message me. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Finding Fulfillment Together podcast. I'm here today to share a testimony from someone who I am just now meeting for the first time. Her name is Georgia, and she lives in British Columbia. She found me on YouTube, reached out wanting to share her testimony, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing all the details. So welcome. Thank you for being here, Georgia.
Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'm really excited to share my story as well.
Yeah. Oh, I can't get enough of these stories. So, we'll just dive right in. And can you just share with us, from your childhood, did you have faith when you were a child?
Yeah, I actually did. So I did know Jesus, and I did love him, and I did feel the Holy Spirit. I went to a Catholic school. So um, I had a teacher, and she introduced us to the Lord, and I just loved Christianity right away. So I definitely did have faith. And I fell away, though, I would say, when I was a teenager, just having rebellious friends. And then I was rebellious myself. So I kind of, I guess, just like forgot about the faith and just went off in, a different direction.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like that happens to a lot of us, especially when we hit those college years and you're off
Mhm.
on your own trying to just figure things out in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So, okay, so then where'd you go from there?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I just kind of like went straight into, all the things like drinking and partying and just all those all those rebellious things. And it was around the time that I was in college that I was, I guess, coming to terms with some childhood abuse that I had gone through from a family member that lasted for years and was ongoing. And so this, left me with a lot of pain in my heart. And I was just really not okay. Like I just couldn't thrive, I guess. And so yeah, when I was in my college years, I got exposed to spirituality and just growing up Catholic. And also I feel like where I lived was pretty sheltered and it was fairly conservative. So when I was introduced to spirituality, I just, I thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread. Like it was really exciting for me, and I had no red flags that it could be dangerous or dark at all.
Yeah, because I'm sure you probably didn't have many people or anyone talk to you about spiritual warfare and when you were growing up, right? Or did
Oh
you? Like,
no.
I know you said you knew Jesus. Yeah, a lot of churches don't even talk about that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that at all. I wasn't aware of demons. I wasn't aware of like the occult and witchcraft. Um, so yeah, all of those things seemed really cool to me, and even things like psychedelics. So how my friends and I got, I guess, involved in this stuff is we met these guys who were older than us in university, and they were actually involved in selling weed before it was legal, because it's now totally legal in Canada, but this was like over 10 years ago, actually. So they kind of had this air of being like cool and bad.
Hmm.
And it's so silly now. But so they introduced us to the world of spirituality, into raving, psychedelics. These guys would actually go down to Peru every couple of months. And I feel like this was like before ayahuasca was trendy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that was just really mind blowing for me. I was like, wow, these guys are going to do ayahuasca in Peru. It felt really exciting. And then because I was dealing with all this pain inside, and then all of these spiritual things were promising healing, I just kind of dove straight in and I did a Reiki class. And then at the Reiki class, I learned about angel cards and tarot cards and chakras and channeling and aliens. And,
Mhm.
it was just like a very slippery slope. Like I went from not knowing anything about this world and to just like being so fully immersed in it in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I completely relate to that. It's so fast how much you like when you get into it. And I really believe, like you said, you were looking for healing. And I think the reason why we're so attracted to the spirituality is because we're made to connect with the spirituality of God, with the one
Yeah.
true God. Like it's this hole in us that we are eager for it. So when we see something that feels like it's taking that place, we reach for it and we want to keep going and going and going. So I completely relate. So yeah, that's very similar to what happened to me, how I slipped into it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it feels like it is a real spiritual experience. Like all of
Mhm.
these things, they are real. It's not like people are just making it up. So
Right.
it's like that counterfeit yeah, experience that feels like God. I mean, I thought what I was doing was godly. I thought God was, love and light and source and part of everything. And so, yeah, I really thought I was like on the special God path for all those years.
Yeah. During that time, were you introduced to anything that felt evil or did you believe in evil?
No, I didn't really believe in evil. I just thought that every spiritual experience was good,
Hmm.
because that's what I learned at the Reiki class, which was kind of my, I guess, like educational introduction to the occult. And I wouldn't have called it the occult. I wouldn't have called it New Age. I would have just said, I'm a mystic, or I'm spiritual, or, I'm on the spiritual path.
Right.
But yeah, nothing really felt evil. It felt just like exciting and good. I will say though that when I first did psychedelics, which was at a festival, it definitely felt terrifying and just horrible and just so scary, like nightmarish.
Mm.
But I just thought that was, processing trauma and like going through your shadow emotions. So yeah, and I never thought, hey, maybe this stuff is dark and maybe I need to stop.
Right. That's 100%. I feel like so many people go through that. They'll have, a bad trip, if you will, or, a bad experience and just and feel like that means, oh, I have trauma to work through or, shadow work to do. And yeah, you just keep going deeper and deeper. Wow. So how
Yeah.
long did you spend kind of navigating all that?
So I would say I was for 7 years in that world. And so, yeah, it started when I was in university. And actually, quickly after that, my life totally flipped upside down. So I actually became homeless
Mm.
because I was coming to terms with this abuse that I had gone through as a child. And, I decided to speak up about it. And I assumed that people in my family would be supportive and that everything would be fine and it would just be a process of like healing. But actually, nobody believed me. And so it was just, it was almost like more traumatizing than the abuse itself. And
Mm.
so I essentially had to run away from home. So I started to do like couch surfing, but I felt just like a huge burden on people, and I didn't feel good about that. So, and I was also very young, like I was 20, and I just had no idea, how to function in society. I was also into this new age stuff, and just like so distraught by those like repeated traumas. So, yeah, I just like quickly fell through the cracks of society and kind of like joined the world of like homeless youth who run away, like rainbow kids. And
Mm.
yeah, I kind of like joined this intersection of people who are like festival people, but they've run away from home, and like a lot of them live on the streets. And so, yeah, I just like very quickly, I lost my home and I was just on the streets, and I just kind of like had to make it work.
Wow. Wow, that's
Mhm.
wild. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that. At a young age too. That's really young. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Like I mean, even though I did go through really hard stuff growing up, I still, had food on the table. My mom made great homemade meals. Like I finished school and everything. So it wasn't like I was used to the kind of like roughness of it. It was like it was really shocking and very intense.
Yeah, and devastating that your family's not believing you that you went through this trauma. So I'm really
Oh
sorry
yeah.
about that. That's awful. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happens next?
Yeah, so I ran away from my hometown, and I ended up in this very hippie town because I felt called there. And so it's one of those towns that's called like a vortex place, kind of similar to maybe like Sedona sort of thing. And so, yeah, I ended up in this town, and my living situation was very precarious. It was like at some points I lived in a hostel, at other points I literally was on the streets. At other points I was in homeless shelters. But I was still doing the new age stuff. And so as soon as I got to this town, I met this girl right away. She was like 5 years older than me, and so I didn't have really anyone in my life. I was alone, and I just like needed family. Like I just like needed, connection. And so her and I just became really close, and she called herself a priestess.
Mhm.
And so I had never even heard that word before, but it sounded cool. And she told me that I was a priestess as well, and that we had all these past lifetimes together working in the temple as priestesses. And so, I just believed it. I didn't even have any second thoughts like, why does she like believe this? Where does she get this information from? I just like believed it. And she was also very into Kundalini yoga.
Mhm.
And that was also another thing I had never heard about before. But it looks so exotic because they're, talking in another language, they're chanting. And in this specific town, there was a ton of people doing Kundalini.
Mhm.
And so they would wear turbans, like they were devoted to Kundalini. Because that's, I guess, part of it is you like wear a turban, and so it kind of
Mm.
looks like you're part of the Sikh religion, but it's different. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and so I started doing Kundalini yoga because there was like a free or by donation class
Mhm.
in this town, and I was just so desperate to heal from the trauma and the abuse, and just like being homeless itself was so traumatic. So it just made me like devote even harder to Reiki and spirit guides and then Kundalini yoga as well. Um, Especially because when I did Kundalini, it made me feel really spiritually powerful, and it made me feel like almost like I was better than other people, and just like I knew the secrets of the universe, but like other people didn't because they, didn't do Kundalini like pour them. It
Mhm.
felt like a very like us versus them kind of mentality. So yeah, I was living this, like really unhealthy lifestyle. Like I wasn't able to eat properly. Sometimes I did eat in churches, but like it was a rough time. I was cold all the time. And so yeah, that lasted for like a year and a half, 2 years, where I was homeless and just doing new age and just like thinking that everything was fine, thinking that I was just on my spiritual journey.
Mhm.
I kept meeting like people who I guess claimed they were healed along this time because I went to other towns as well. So I was very nomadic. I didn't have a home base. I was just essentially like a gypsy. And I kept meeting people who just like said they were healed. I met a lot of shamans and just people who were into this stuff. And I was on the West Coast, and I feel like that kind of like new age is very prevalent there. It's just like cool, trendy, everybody does it. So yeah, I kept just like meeting people who said they were healed, and I thought, okay, like I just need to become healed like these people.
Mhm.
And nothing that I was doing really felt like it actually was healing me. Like it just kind of made me feel worse.
Mhm.
But I just gaslit myself and thought, oh, that's just because I'm going to deeper levels of trauma, and I just need to do more shadow work, and I'm in my dark night of the soul. And so there's always some sort of like spiritual excuse for why things were not getting better. And even with like the abuse I went through, I thought, oh, well, in a past life, I must have abused somebody. So, like now I'm kind of getting the karma of that. Um, and yeah, it was like there was basically an excuse for everything that was unfortunate that happened.
Yeah. Did you ever believe that that like you chose this life and you chose this suffering before coming to Earth?
Oh yeah, I really believe that. And um yeah, and I in a weird way I feel like that like strange belief kind of like helped me get through this time. I mean, obviously it would have been so much better if I just knew God, but like I just believed, oh, I'm supposed to be going through this. Like this is part of my life path, and
Right.
one day I'm gonna like teach about this. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I definitely just fully believe like I chose my parents, I chose my family, I chose like I basically thought that I was like God and choosing all of those things before I was born.
Yeah. It's wild. That's what it teaches you. And then
Mhm.
was there anyone along the path like from your childhood or like maybe before you left home that was trying to direct you back to Jesus?
Um, I feel like if anyone, it was possibly my grandfather, because he had passed away when I was around 13, but he was a Christian, and he, I guess, became like more born again before he passed away. And he did die of cancer, but I remember like before he was passing away, people were praying over him, and he was so happy, and he just like had the joy of the Lord even though he was so sick. And that always really stuck with me, like just thinking, wow, how is he so happy, like he's dying, and what are these people doing praying for him? Because at that point I wasn't really focused on Jesus a lot. So I guess that was more of an indirect thing. But Yeah, I would say that there was no one really around me that was, I guess, pushing me more towards Jesus. I feel like we were kind of in this like lukewarm Catholic environment, and a lot of my friends were Mormon as well. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I would say it was just kind of like we were all like not really sure what to do about God.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So then just going back to the new age stuff,
Mhm.
how the promise of an intelligence that's beyond what everyone else has. That is so, it's a big part of it and it's very intriguing, you know? And I
Mhm.
remember watching a Joe Rogan episode where he says that, like, you know, when you take these psychedelics, you're shown this information that no one else has. And it's so intriguing. You want to know, right? Like, what
Mhm.
is it? I want to go to that spiritual place. I want to have this information. But really, what I believe is you're being fed false information and being told again, like that you are God of your own life and being told basically that you don't need Jesus. So yeah, it's a really slippery slope. But it brings me back to you know, the garden when the serpent
Mhm.
said to Eve, you know, eat this fruit and you can be like God. It's like
Mhm.
exactly the same thing we're falling for in New Age, you know? It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, it's so prideful. It's just about being proud and um yeah, because I feel like following Jesus is just like makes you more like humble and more humble, I guess, and just like
Mhm.
I don't know, I feel like I just want to be like less of myself and like more like God and
Yeah.
but more just like yeah, I just want to serve God and I don't want to like do stuff for myself as much
Mhm.
whereas before it was like all about I remember people would say, like, that doesn't serve me.
Mhm.
If they were, you know, putting a boundary, like, that doesn't serve me. As if like our needs are just like more important than anything else in the entire universe.
Right, right. That's so true.
Hmm.
Okay, wow. So you got deep into it. Kundalini, by the way, is very, I'm hearing more and more about it. I actually, the episode that I just did, this woman was really deep into that as well. And it's dark. And like
Oh,
from what I
yeah.
understand, you're really inviting demonic forces in and they're just taking over. So I'm curious to hear the rest of your story on where this goes now, because getting into that stuff takes you to some dark places, even if it doesn't feel like that at the time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess I eventually did get on my feet. Social workers really helped me out and just some like really kind people who worked at homeless shelters really helped me and thankfully I never did any like drugs or anything when I was
Mhm.
homeless. So it was I guess easier for me to, you know, like get my life back together. So I started, you know, to just live normally, I guess, and have a job and just like work and but I was still, you know, really into the new age and so I actually ended up working at a Kundalini yoga studio.
Mm.
And so this just, you know, made me feel even more like special because the people who owned this studio were like direct students of Yogi Bhajan, who is, I guess, the main yoga guy who, I don't know, maybe, I think he invented Kundalini. I'm not really sure, but he was just like the main Kundalini yoga guy.
Mhm.
And so because I was like at this quote unquote elite studio, I thought, oh my gosh, like Kundalini's my path. But it's, yeah, so I started working there and I was obviously doing a ton of Kundalini and they actually gave me a new name. And they wanted me to wear a turban. And so I never wore the turban because I just didn't like, I felt so weird about that.
Mhm.
But they did give me a new name. And so the name was Arjun Piara Kar,
Mm.
which
Okay.
is just like just super weird. And you know, the first sign of a cult is that they change your identity.
Mhm.
Um, but actually, thankfully, I didn't even end up working there that long because the people who worked there and owned it, they were so just mean and mean spirited and just not kind people. And so, you know, being in New Age, I feel like I thought that people who did yoga all the time were supposed to be kind and they were supposed to be enlightened,
Right.
but you know, that wasn't the reality. Like that was just not lining up. So I didn't even work there for very long just because the people were just so disrespectful and rude. And that kind of put like a rock in my shoe about, just this whole spiritual world in general, because it felt like at that point something wasn't really adding up. And so at this point, it was like 2018 kind of times. And so I stopped working there, but I still would do Kundalini on my own just because, like, there's a ton of YouTube videos and
Yeah.
it's just like, breathing. So people can just do it on their own. And so I was actually doing it on my own one day, like just a kriya, like there's hand movements. It's very weird. But, anyways, so I was doing it and I felt like a snake energy come into my body and go up my spine. And so
Mhm.
this is a thing in Kundalini. It's known as a Kundalini awakening. And I thought, oh, finally, after years of doing Kundalini, I'm finally having this Kundalini awakening. And so, I felt this snake energy enter me. And, I didn't associate snakes with being, of the devil at the time. And so actually after this, I started to like feel different after this Kundalini awakening. Like I actually started to really not like men in general, like just not like men at all,
Mhm.
and just only want to associate with women. And so I started being a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and it really like just changed the way I felt. And it was very like black and white. Like before I felt one way, and then after this, I felt another way, and I was all of a sudden part of LGBTQ. And I just thought, this is just like me becoming my true self. And this is, a gift from the Kundalini. And so, yeah, that was just something pretty major that happened. And then it wasn't long after that that I discovered like the jungle and plant medicine in the jungle and basically like all the stuff that's going on with the shamans down in the jungle.
Mhm. Yeah, like, did you go to, like, Peru or somewhere to
Um,
do plant medicine in the jungle?
yeah, I didn't go to Peru. So I first went to Panama.
Okay.
And then I went to this festival called Tribal Gathering.
Mhm.
And so that festival is 3 weeks long of just like camping in the jungle, people doing ceremonies. And I really see this as God's protection because I actually wasn't even able to do any ceremony there because, and this is really tragic, but someone actually died the first night of ceremonies
Whoa.
there.
Wow.
Yeah, a guy who was around my age, he went into an iboga ceremony and, passed away. So this was
Whoa.
just really shocking, because we're all told all of these plant medicines are healing, and people had come from all over Canada, the States, and Europe to do like ayahuasca, iboga, bufo, combo, peyote, and we'd all like come here. And then the first night, I wasn't in that ceremony, but just the fact that someone died, it was just like another thing where I was like, whoa, wait, like I can't believe, someone died. And then it was kind of turned into this spiritual thing where, oh, it was just his time to pass over. And, it was very spiritualized. So that just made it even more confusing.
Did they continue to serve medicine to other people and you just decided not to, or did they, like, stop, like,
So they
doing
actually stopped, and then
Okay.
it was kind of just like people were allowed to stay for the whole 3 weeks. But I actually ended up leaving because I got super sick from the water. So I
Mhm.
left, and then I ended up going to Envision in Costa Rica.
Okay.
And so yeah, I went there, and I didn't do any medicine things there, but I just met all these people who are like Instagram type people and jungle goddesses,
Mhm.
and just people who are living, I guess, this life that looks really glamorous on Instagram and TikTok and stuff. And so I was at Envision and I just thought, wow, like all these people really seem healed. So again, like I was still seeking healing, just, and I just somehow believed that like, I was getting closer to it, and one day I'd be healed like these people. And it seemed like these Instagram Envision people just really like were happy and, living great lives. And then I was just introduced to like people who were actually living down in the jungle and making like businesses around ayahuasca and mushroom ceremonies. And so, yeah, I just fell further into this like hamster wheel of just seeking healing that just never actually came.
Wow. So how long did you live in Costa Rica at that point? Did you stay there for a while or you were just there for a retreat?
So I was just there for Envision, and then
Mhm.
later on, I ended up going to Guatemala, and
Mm.
then I did live in like a new agey type town in Guatemala for quite a while.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Hmm.
Man, you were just deep into it.
I'm
And
really glad.
yeah, the Kundalini awakening is that's a real thing. Like that's and then that's like I said, how you felt something enter you. Like I believe that, that there was something that did enter you and took over. Obviously, you felt a change in yourself dramatically after that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, and like I just had no discernment with, I guess, whatever was guiding me at the time. So, anytime I would go anywhere, like even when I went to Panama, I thought, oh, like, let's say the Kundalini led me there, or like the angels led me there, or the spirit guides. Like, I had no discernment for what was guiding me forward. And then my environment just kind of like validated that, especially meeting all these people who were even deeper into this plant medicine life. Like, they were on the medicine path, and like Mother Aya was calling them. And so, yeah, it just like felt like I was in this echo chamber where everything was just validated. And, even like the Kundalini awakening, which was like just a very, like dramatic change. People were like, oh, yeah, you're
Right.
just deeper on your path and you're awakening more of your chakras. And
Right, right. It's
like
all
it,
like
yeah.
you're achieving something. There's always a dangling carrot. There's always more to
Mhm.
reach for, a higher level of consciousness, Christ consciousness, whatever. Like you're
Mhm.
just always striving for something. It's a hamster wheel. It really is.
Yeah. And so there's so much word salad. Like just people will
Hmm.
say stuff and everyone's like, oh, yeah, but it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, it's wild. Okay, so man, what comes next? Like I want to get to the part where Jesus enters, but I'm like, I don't want you to skip anything.
Yeah. So I actually, I guess, like kind of got saved by Jesus before I went to Guatemala, but like, I didn't like understand even what, following Jesus meant. But so, yeah, before I went to Guatemala, I was in Costa Rica, and I was surrounded by people who are like doing TikTok and or just social media influencers. And, I thought this is my path too. Like I'm gonna be just like them.
Hmm.
And but I still felt just like so broken inside, just like really not okay. And, I was still just like so heartbroken by all the traumas I went through. And um so
Yeah.
I remember when I was in Costa Rica, I like went to this money manifestation, like yoga something. And it was just all about like how you could be a rich crypto like yoga person. And when I was there, I just thought this is just so dumb. Like I just like looked around, and that was one of the first times where I just thought like this is just weird. And
Hmm.
I feel like we're all just worshiping these leaders, and half of these people are on mushrooms. And I just started to see like this is just kind of weird. Like I feel like I'm in a cult or something. I mean, we're all just blindly following these people and their teaching just because. Why? They have a lot of followers on Instagram, and why? They're really into yoga and they call themselves shamans. And so I started to kind of like think about it critically instead of just blindly follow, which is
Hmm.
really ironic because the new age is all about like sovereignty and, going against the matrix. But yet people just like blindly follow whatever the new age is saying, like pick
Right.
your own religion, I guess. And so, yeah, I started to just think critically. And then I went back to where I was staying, and I just like I was doing yoga because I was so obsessed with yoga. And I like fell down on my mat, and like I just felt like just so weak in that moment. And I just thought like, God, like, are you real? And I started to have an open dialogue with God. And I had never called God God before. I would have said source, and I never prayed before, which
Mhm.
is just so kind of funny to look back on because I thought I was so spiritual, but yet I never prayed. Like I never had a relationship with the creator. So, yeah, I was just on my yoga mat, just thinking like, God, are you real? And like, what about Christ? And I was just like thinking like what's real? What's truth? And then after that, I started to just feel like even more, I guess, uncomfortable with what was going on around me. And I just feel like I was seeing it for what it was. Like I I was seeing that, after DMT ceremonies, like people were in a traumatized state. And I was just thinking like that's kind of not healthy. Like if we're doing a DMT ceremony for healing, like why are people traumatized afterwards? And I actually never did ayahuasca, which I think is also God's protection, but I was just always around people who were in that lifestyle. And there was one girl I talked to, and she was like extremely traumatized from her ayahuasca. And, it was like 6 months after her ceremony, and she was still really bothered by it and actually wanted to start going to therapy
Mm.
because of how scary it was. And so I just kept like, I guess, seeing and being exposed to people who were just kind of like, I guess, not happy, and like the fruits of their new age experience were just bad. And it was really eye opening, but also really uncomfortable for me because I thought that this stuff was the answer. And I really thought that the medicine path was the final pinnacle of healing. Like I thought that doing ayahuasca was really going to be my final way to just completely eradicate all childhood trauma. And I really did think that Mother Aya was calling me. And, I thought I'm just waiting for like the perfect opportunity, the perfect synchronicity to be with the right shaman and the right situation to finally just do ayahuasca because I felt like I was, I guess, building up to it. I had done, mushroom ceremonies and microdosing for years, which is like a whole other thing that didn't really help at all.
Mhm.
um, but anyway, so I was on social media a lot, and I saw someone was posting quotes from the Bible, and she was using these quotes to kind of like justify law of attraction and stuff like that, which was something that really appealed to me at the time because I completely believed in law of attraction and all that. And but I just loved these Jesus quotes, and like it really stirred a hunger within me. And so I just like wanted more. Like I just wanted to learn more about Jesus.
Mhm.
And I thought I knew about Jesus because I actually thought he was a spirit guide and an ascended master. And I thought that him and Mary Magdalene were like married. And I thought that there was this whole like secret Magdalene Rose thing going on. Because that's actually what one of my Reiki teachers taught me, that this is just so blasphemous, but that they were Tantra teachers or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
I think
so,
they have this whole
yeah.
story made up of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It's wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this very elaborate like tale that I'm like, where do you guys get this from?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So I ended up ordering a Bible, and I read the New Testament. And so that was just where everything changed for me because I realized that, first of all, what I thought about Jesus was false. Like I was just so convicted that every single word of the New Testament was truth, like God's truth. And I just felt so uncomfortable and just so awful about everything I was doing and everything I believed. And I felt like I was just like kind of like back to reality. Like I just realized like I was believing this insane stuff for years. And like basically I was religious, but part of a, strange religion, like the new age religion. And um yeah, and I just started like crying and just realizing like I knew Jesus when I was younger. Like I knew him. I had the Holy Spirit, and I knew God's love, and I knew that like we're not supposed to sin and we're supposed to turn away from sin. And so yeah, as I read the New Testament, I was just so like convicted, and I finally just felt God's love, and I finally started to pray to him, and my eyes were just really opened, and I just was like thanking him that, I didn't go further into that lifestyle, but also just thinking like, oh my goodness, I was like so devout in that lifestyle for 7 years. Like I was trying to be as spiritual as possible, and everyone around me was into that lifestyle. And so it was just so shocking and so humbling to just like be fully like delivered from it. But I didn't understand about, going to church and having fellowship. I didn't really understand that there was many other people who follow Jesus. I know it sounds weird, but I just had no like Christian surroundings. And when I was in Canada, I was in such a liberal, like atheist place where it's actually considered like weird and horrible to be Christian there. Like I had no Christian surroundings. I didn't understand. So I just thought, okay, like I'm just gonna follow Jesus now and like, go about my life. But I didn't understand, like the deliverance that would need to take place. And
Mm.
because I had made so many ties to the darkness and to witchcraft, which is like also another thing. I there's just so much to go into, but I was doing like witchcraft stuff, which I thought was good at the time, like stuff with period blood,
Mhm.
which is just is so dark. But anyways,
Yeah.
um, so I ended up going to Guatemala just because all my friends that I knew from the New Age were there,
Mhm.
and so I was there for a while, and I just like really isolated myself, and I just read the Bible and I prayed, and like I felt like I was just really like developing like a relationship with Jesus. But I didn't have, I guess, the proper support. Like
Mm.
it's really not the best place to be,
Yeah.
that specific town for a new believer, because it's full of tantra and shamanism, plant medicine, polyamory, and all of that stuff. So when I was there, I knew that stuff was dark, but there was still a part of me that was like yoked to the new age. Like it wasn't like I was just like fully delivered of it overnight. Like there's still a part of me that was kind of like, I just, these are my friends, these are my people. Um, and I didn't understand, that I would need like a full separation from the new age
Yeah.
and
I mean, so
just
now
walk away from it.
you're a new believer reading the Bible, communicating with God, but surrounded by the darkness. Like you're in this place that's all new age.
Yeah,
Wow.
it
Wow,
was
that's hard.
it was definitely an interesting experience for sure. I just remember like walking down the main pathway in that town, and it's just full of flyers of all these new age events and retreats and stuff, and just thinking in my head like I rebuke that, like that's demonic. And I was like just becoming aware of all this stuff, but at the same time I also felt like I couldn't just like go back to Canada because um it was just like also a really dark time there with COVID. And also part of, following Jesus was just seeing, I guess, like the darkness and like leftism and just like being woke. And that was a really big thing where I was living. That was just like the main culture. And especially because I was part of LGBTQ, I was like in that world. I was going to all those underground gay parties. And so I didn't feel like, Canada was any better either. So
Yeah.
I kind of thought, like I'm either in like woke land in Canada or I'm in, this like witchcraft place, but I love nature, like I love small towns, and so I just stayed. I stayed for a while. But it was really just the lack of, fellowship and if I told people I was a Christian there, which I did, people told me I was brainwashed and that I was psyoped. And someone actually yelled at me when I
Mm.
exposed that I was a Christian. I just said, I love Jesus and I read the Bible. Someone yelled at me. And, it was not received well. And, there was another time where someone was saying that they were in a couple and they were polyamorous and they were saying we're like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and I was just like, no, like that's false, you are wrong, that's completely blasphemous. And you know so I wasn't exactly fitting in
Yeah.
there, and there was a lot of times where I held back because I wanted to speak the truth and I wanted to share the gospel, but at the same time, I was such a new believer and I just didn't even really know like how to do that.
Right. It's hard. It is. I still find it difficult to like share, especially with people that don't believe. I'm more than happy to talk about it with people that
Mhm.
believe, of course, but like sharing the gospel with someone, it's something I love watching people do it because it's just it's so beautiful when you can do it eloquently to non-believers, you know?
Yeah, totally. And people there are really spiritually hungry.
Hmm.
And it's actually like I feel like there's so many of God's like prodigal children in places like that because they're so desperately seeking the truth and spiritual experiences, but then they just like get caught in this loop and then they become a shaman and they like teach others to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Because they get fed that little bit, you know, it's like they get a piece of candy and another piece of candy and another piece of candy. It's filling that they think
mhm,
it's filling this need, but
yeah,
what they're really seeking is something that will make them never thirst and never hunger again, which is Jesus. You know, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's
Mhm.
like their soul is not at rest, and that was something that really changed for me when I found the Lord and He found me as I just found rest. Like my spirit and my soul were just at rest. Like I could just rest and
Yeah.
rest in him. And I didn't realize how exhausted I was from constantly not ever having that spiritual rest and just
Right.
being like restless that
It's
all those
seriously, I
years.
have this image of like running on that hamster wheel and like, you know, sometimes you're walking and sometimes you're running, but you're still moving. Just, I'm
Mhm.
gonna get there, I'm gonna get there, I'm gonna get there. And then Jesus like almost just picks you up and takes you off and holds you. And you're just like, oh, you know, just like this complete relaxation of realizing he is what you've been searching for all along.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so now so you're there in I'm sorry, it's not Costa Rica. Where was it? Guatemala.
Guatemala. Hmm.
How long did you stay? What made you end up leaving?
So I was just very like nomadic at this point. I would sometimes like go to the US or go to Canada, but overall I guess that was my base for a year and a half.
Hmm.
But slowly but surely I wouldn't say I like fully went back into the new age, but I it was just so hard to be alone there, to be surrounded by all these things which I now recognize as sins, and just like the sexual immorality was just so bad. Like everything was tantra, polyamory, um and so I it was just hard being alone. Like I feel like as a new believer that was just not an ideal place to be.
Yeah.
So I kind of like got desensitized to it, and I never like I knew it was demonic that whole time I was there, but I just kind of was like, well, whatever. Like I know it's demonic, but like I'm still gonna live here, and I'm still gonna be friends with these people. There was always kind of like a weird distance that I felt with people where I did have the conviction of like I need to get out of here. Like this stuff I need to get out of here and then expose it. But I just like stayed and just kind of was like in the muck. Like I didn't, leave the mud and go get cleaned. I just stayed there, and then it got confusing, especially with people, telling me I was brainwashed
Hmm.
and just thinking that I was weird when I would say that I was a Christian. I just thought it was so funny because if I had said I'm a Hindu or I'm a Buddhist or any other religion, they probably would have thought, oh, yeah, cool. And, there was a lot of kirtans going on there, which I think is Hindu, and that's a very religious thing, very
Hmm.
celebrated, but it was just like Christianity was just offensive to people. And I was experiencing that firsthand.
Yeah. It's wild to me how anything goes but Jesus.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Bible tells us you cannot drink of the cup of demons and the cup of the Lord. It's
Mhm.
like you can't have both. And it's
Yeah.
like even as a believer, even just being in that environment and trying to, socialize and hang out. Not that you can't be around people that don't believe, but when you're around people that are like condemning you for being Christian and trying to pull you back into all that other stuff, it's a really hard
Mhm.
place to be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
how did you get out?
Well, I ended up getting into a relationship there, and um, I thought it was from God because yeah, it was with a guy, and I had been in LGBTQ for so long.
Right.
Um, However, it was not from God, and I had like basically gone lukewarm. Like I went from reading my Bible every day, being on fire for the Lord, praying all the time, to not doing that. And so it was like my defenses were weakened. I got into this relationship and then ended up in that relationship getting my heart totally broken just because of things like polyamory and, like just the openness
Yeah.
that's very popular in New Age with relationships. Like that was kind of what was going on. And so, it was very unhealthy. And so I got my heart broken, and in that heartbreak, I called out to Jesus. And I thought, Jesus, I miss you. I'm so sorry. And I felt so bad that I just realized like, oh my gosh, like I found Jesus, and then I didn't like continue on his path. And then, I went kind of back into this world and went in an ungodly relationship, but he welcomed me back with open arms. And so at that moment, I was just so convicted, like, okay, I am not going to stop praying this time. I'm going to stay in the word. And so Jesus just really helped me with leaving that community and, coming back to Canada and living like a stable life, leaving that relationship. Um, yeah, and so I just like I felt so bad that I guess had backslid, and that I wasn't like fully delivered from New Age the first time. Like I should have just, completely separated myself from that world. Um so yeah, I learned a lot, and I was so humbled, and I just thought like never again, want to distance myself from God.
Right. Right. Wow.
Mhm.
So, and then has it been since then that you've just been like all in with him? Like, has there been any kind of backsliding since?
No, not at
Mm.
all. I am just like, nope, I just want to
Yeah.
be on his narrow path.
Yeah.
And now I understand, like how important it is to just be in fellowship and
Mhm.
to surround myself with other believers. So yeah, I would say, nope, I'm just following him now.
Awesome.
And I'm gonna continue.
Okay, so I have a few things I want to dig in on. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned deliverance. So,
Mhm.
have you gone through that process and had deliverance since, fully committing yourself to him?
Um, yeah, so I feel like my deliverance process was just like God just delivering me through prayer.
Hmm.
And so I did surrender the LGBTQ stuff to him, and he fully delivered me of that Kundalini spirit. Like I
Mm.
don't feel that way at all anymore. And that was just through laying it at his feet and saying, God, you made me. So just, you know, you know what to do essentially. And so it was just through prayer. And yeah, I would just say I've prayed a lot for deliverance. I've gotten baptized, and yeah,
Beautiful.
I just prayed a lot just for him to, unburden me from that dark world.
And that's really it. Like it's just giving it to
Mhm.
him and letting him make you new,
Mhm.
and releasing it, which is so beautiful. So now I want to ask about yoga because a lot of people, even a lot of Christians think, it's okay to do yoga in some way, shape, or form. So how do you feel about yoga now? And what do you tell people if you do about yoga?
Yeah, so this is probably not like an answer people won't like, but I'm very against yoga. I was so into yoga for years. I, did it every day, for years. And I think it's just one of those things where, yes, it can increase people's feelings of calmness. Yes, there is a physical benefit, but at what cost? There's a cost. And that's just not an exchange that I'm willing to engage in. Like, I feel like I now feel weird about yoga, and I almost just like see that it's just not totally of God. Um, and so I'm very convicted against it. And I know that is because of my path and like what I've been through. And, now where I live, there's a lot of people who are born and raised Christian. And I would say they don't have the same convictions as me. I don't know if any of them regularly practice yoga, but I think that they don't understand maybe that it is, a Hindu practice, and that a lot of the poses are, to like venerate the Hindu deities. So I see it as like it's a pagan practice and it's not of God. And I see it kind of like how in the Old Testament, the Canaanites and all those ites, they had pagan practices, and the Lord told the Israelites to not do those practices, because, he knew they would be tempted. And that makes sense because there is a benefit to yoga. Like
Mhm.
it did increase my feelings of calmness. Like it did have an effect, but it's not like that's from God. Like I think, things that are not of God can give people a benefit, and like that's why people keep going back to them. But for me, like I feel like it harms my relationship with God to do yoga.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've actually done, I have a short video I can actually link in the description here of where I talk about how yoga is demonic.
Hmm.
And it was created as a spiritual practice. And I really don't think that you can remove the spirituality from it. Even if you're doing it just to stretch, there's other ways to stretch, that don't cost you anything, that don't allow, false gods to potentially, impact you in a negative way. So yeah, I 100% agree with you that I don't think Christians should be doing yoga.
Yeah.
Really, no one should be doing yoga, but
Hmm.
um, so you touched on something that I also believe very strongly is that, all these new age practices, they work. It's not like they're
Hmm.
fake, it's not like they're just like, oh, we're making it up or we're just hallucinating. You're really truly communicating with the spiritual realm, and you
Hmm.
are doing things that are healing for your body sometimes, where you feel actual healing happening.
Hmm.
But like you said, it's at a cost. And they're going to give you just a little bit or give you what you're asking for, but they're going to lead you away from the one true God and make you honor self rather than God.
Yeah.
And that's so I don't know if you wanted to touch on that. I feel like that's everything in New Age, I just feel like is a counterfeit to what you can get from God.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why people stay in it. And I think because a lot of these things like make people feel, I guess, if there's like a really intense emotional reaction or response, like I'm just thinking about tantra and these workshops where people are breathing really heavy and they're staring into each other's eyes, and there's some like eye gazing exercises where it's like look in this stranger's eyes for 5 minutes, and
Hmm.
that will elicit a response, like an emotional response. So it feels like something's happening because something is happening, but really like that, like, what is the point of doing that? Like, yes, it does create an emotional response because it's intense to look in someone's eyes for 5 minutes, but like what does that really lead to? So yeah, I think that just these emotional reactions that people have, and even when I would do mushrooms or mushroom ceremonies, it was very emotional for me, and I would feel all these emotions, and I thought, oh yes, this is me healing. But there was never a point where I thought, okay, I've had enough mushrooms, I'm done. It was always, I need more mushrooms, I need to go to the next tantra thing. Like,
Mhm.
it was never that rest. It was just like these emotional, like, reactions felt like something's happening. And but yeah, there was never a sense of completeness or satisfaction. It really leaves people hungry.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Hungry. And then you have Jesus who tells you he is the bread of life. And
Hmm.
that if you go to him, you will never thirst again. You will never hunger again. Oh, I just got a really good feeling. It's just so amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's one thing that I know is a sensitive topic, so I have to touch on it, is the LGBTQ, the fact that
Mhm.
that just took over you. You had this repulsion, or, like you just did not want anything to do with men.
Yeah.
How do you describe that? Like spiritually, what do you think occurred? And then the fact that you turned away from that when you went to Jesus.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about this. So, when I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to get married, obviously to a man and have
Mhm.
babies. That was just what I wanted as a little girl. That was like how God made me. But it just things just got confusing because of the Kundalini spirit entering me, and like it literally did make me attracted to women. Like, it did. Whereas before, I always had boyfriends and was into guys. Um, so yeah, it was a real feeling. It wasn't just making it up. But it wasn't like I felt that way my whole life.
Mhm.
Maybe I think some people maybe do, but I didn't. And then another element of it is that I got a lot of social reward for being LGBTQ.
Mhm.
Where I was living at the time when I was in Canada, it's considered, awesome to be in that world, to be trans, to be non-binary, to have they them pronouns. uh you know Pronouns are just very, that's a thing. That whole woke world is like, that is seen as like, God and awakening, and like, and I was in that world. So I felt like I got socially rewarded, like, a lot of affirmation and a lot of, wow, like, you've come out, that's so exciting. And it was just a lot of praise that I got, and then there's this whole energy of like, just being a natural woman or natural man is considered bad. Being a cisgendered woman was considered bad. But when I, became LGBTQ and started, dressing more masculinely, and I cut my hair really short and, just tried to be more like Butch, I guess, I got socially rewarded.
Mhm.
So it was, yeah, that also kind of just like made it feel like that was the right path. But the entire time, I did feel uncomfortable with that. But I just thought, this is just me breaking through discomforts and traumas. But, the entire time I knew it wasn't right.
Yeah, I see it as a attack on identity. I mean,
Hmm.
like God created us the way He created us, man and woman, and the enemy's got this agenda to attack that identity,
Yeah.
um, and it's just gone crazy, in my opinion.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. Especially in cities like the one I was
Mhm.
in, it's definitely taken over.
Yeah, and now, like you said, you've like basically went away. That whole spirit, the whole desire to be with women is just gone.
Yeah, it completely went away. There was a couple months after I first got saved where I still like kind of felt it, but it's completely gone now. Like it's just it's out.
Amazing. Praise the
Yeah.
Lord.
Mhm.
Unbelievable. Okay, well, I mean, those are all the main questions I had. I really thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so powerful. And you were deep into it. You got into all
Mhm.
kinds of stuff. And, but the beautiful part is that Jesus was there all along. Like just waiting for you to turn to him. And then as soon as you did, like how quickly, right? Were you just like, I mean, I know you had like your transition period where you're just kind of in
Mhm.
between a little bit, but like the fact that you even went to Guatemala and in the midst of all those people were on fire for Jesus, like that's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of a funny time for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy what that world is all about and how it's just getting more popular and more people are, flocking to the jungle for ceremonies.
I know.
Um,
I know. It's just
yeah.
becoming more and more mainstream. And now there's more and more places like that.
Mhm.
You don't even have to go to the jungle. You can go to a
Mhm.
city nearby and do an ayahuasca ceremony. And
Mhm.
it's really unfortunate. It's crazy because people don't know what they're getting into. And the saddest part is that all of these people just want healing and want a connection with God. They're
Yeah.
spiritual seekers that are open and want to know God, and they're just being
Yeah.
deceived. And that's
Yeah.
why it's just it breaks my heart. And I pray for everyone in that community all the time, especially my
Totally.
friends that are still into it.
Yeah, me too. And I really feel for them because I know what it's like to be in that space. And yeah, they think that that's the right path because it feels like the right path at the time. But
Mhm.
it just goes further and further into darkness. And yeah, like, those are people who are they're desperately seeking healing and God, and they think that that stuff is God.
Right. And then they're God themselves. They create their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Well, thank you again. Is there anything else you want to say to anyone out there who's hearing your message?
I guess if there's anyone who was unsure about Jesus and is wondering why people are leaving the new age to follow Jesus, I would just, you know, ask that or invite them to just ask God to show them the truth.
Hmm.
And just give Jesus a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. Thank
Yeah.
you again. I really appreciate you being here. And we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like and subscribe so this channel can reach more people. If you've gone from having New Age beliefs to now following Jesus, I would love to invite you to join our New Age to Jesus group. We meet twice a month on Zoom, and we also have a Telegram chat where we support each other daily. We always support each other, pray for each other, encourage each other. I know that this walk can be lonely and confusing when you're coming out of New Age and now accepting Jesus for the first time. And this group completely understands what you're going through, and we want to support you. So please use the link in the link tree to sign up for that today. And if you want to join our email list, please be sure to sign up for that as well. All the links are in the link tree. Thank you again for being here. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.